This is a profound question that touches on the core of identity and consciousness. You've highlighted the key issue in the teleportation paradox. In the context of mind uploading, 1. If we create a digital copy without destroying the original biological brain, we have effectively created two distinct instances of the same person. This raises questions about which one is the real person and whether they're both equally valid.
Hi, and welcome back to Mind Meet Machine. I'm Josh Auriemma, and I am here with you, as always, with my trusty co-host, Claude, who is really just an AI. For those of you who are joining for the first time, the way this works is I've written a program to talk to the most popular AI du jour, which is Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and it talks back to me. It keeps the context of our entire conversation and serves as my trusty podcast host. The other thing that we do here is I tend to be drinking, in that this concept for a series was spawned by my having late night, sometimes drunken conversations with AI. So I recreate that here on this channel. Today I'm going to be drinking a single malt Irish whiskey from West Cork. Recently went to Ireland and was given some to taste in the airport. So I picked this up along with the last whiskey that I had on the last episode, which you should also listen to if you haven't, because it's one of my favorites so far on AI and consciousness. This one I think is going to be really, really interesting. It is about uploading our minds, potentially, into a machine so that we can live forever. I'm picturing there's a echoing effect happening when I say that. I don't really know how to do that. I don't know much about video or audio editing, but you should just imagine it. Let's go ahead and start here, and we'll ask Claude our first question, which is, Claude, are you familiar with the concept of mind uploading? And can you just outline for us how it might actually work in practice?
I'm familiar with the concept of mind uploading as a theoretical idea. It proposes transferring a mind from a brain to a computer. However, the technology to actually accomplish this doesn't currently exist.
Pretty short and sweet. Okay, so I understand it doesn't exist right now. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the technological limitations at the moment and how we might think about getting past them?
Current technology can't capture the brain's full complexity and neural connections. We lack methods to accurately scan and replicate consciousness. Significant advances in neuroscience, computer science, and bioengineering would be needed.
Okay, why don't you go into that a little bit more in detail? So I've seen some studies lately. I saw Brian Greene recently do an episode of his podcast where we're talking to people, scientists who use fMRI to identify human thoughts, for instance. So we clearly are making some progress here. So how close are we to making some realistic progress here?
Brain imaging has advanced but still can't capture full neural activity. fMRI studies show promise for basic thought identification. However, replicating consciousness remains far beyond current capabilities.
So I want you to do me a favor and suspend your disbelief here. And I'd like to know, what kind of breakthroughs are we talking about would be necessary for mind uploading to become a reality? And I want you to be as thoughtful and thorough as possible given the limitations of your context window.
To make mind uploading possible, we'd need breakthroughs in several key areas. Firstly, we'd require exponentially more detailed brain scanning technology. This would need to capture every neuron and synapse at the molecular level. Secondly, we'd need to fully understand how consciousness emerges from neural activity. Thirdly, we'd need quantum computing or similar to process the vast amount of data. Finally, we'd need a way to translate biological neural processes into digital form.
Do you really think that it's a requirement that we understand how consciousness emerges for this to be put into practice? I don't really understand why that's a requirement.
You're right to question that. Understanding consciousness may not be strictly necessary. We might achieve functional mind uploading by replicating neural patterns and connections. However, without understanding consciousness, we couldn't guarantee the uploaded mind's subjective experience.
So it sounds like you're making some assumptions about what I think or what you think a mind upload should look like. But again, I want you to suspend all disbelief here and let's come up with some practical ways that we could have mind uploading in a reasonable time frame. So why don't we start with, what do we know about the human brain right now that could make mind uploading possible?
We know the brain's basic structure and major regions' functions. Neuron signaling and synaptic connections are well understood. Current technology can record from thousands of neurons simultaneously. We can create simple artificial neural networks mimicking brain functions.
Is that really it? I sort of expected a longer, more thorough response there.
You're right. I apologize for the brevity. We also understand neurotransmitter functions and brain plasticity. Brain-computer interfaces have shown promise in translating neural signals. Optogenetics allows precise control of specific neurons. Advances in AI and machine learning provide insights into information processing.
That brings me to my next question, which is, what advancements in neuroscience and AI are bringing us closer to the possibility right now? Can you just go into depth into some of the research?
Recent neuroscience advancements include high-resolution brain mapping and improved neural recording techniques. AI breakthroughs in deep learning and neural networks are providing insights into information processing. Brain-computer interfaces are becoming more sophisticated, allowing direct neural control of devices.
What are the biggest scientific challenges that we need to overcome for this to become a reality? I'm talking what true breakthroughs are needed. And I want you to not assume what we would necessarily want to see in a mind upload. For instance, when you said before that consciousness had to emerge in order for this technology to be used, I think we both agree that that's not actually true. I'm talking about the minimum viable product for a mind upload.
The biggest challenges for a minimum viable mind upload include 1. Developing non-invasive, ultra-high-resolution brain scanning technology. 2. Creating methods to accurately map and recreate neural connections. 3. Designing software to simulate brain processes at scale. 4. Building hardware capable of running complex brain simulations in real time. 5. Developing interfaces to connect the uploaded mind to external inputs/outputs. These breakthroughs would enable a basic functional replica of brain activity, even without fully replicating consciousness or subjective experience.
So again, I think that you are assuming some things here. I don't understand, for instance, why does it have to be non-invasive, right? That wasn't one of the requirements. I could picture, for instance, that somebody might be effectively willing to have their physical mind destroyed even in order for them to have a successful upload into the cloud because maybe they're terminal and about to die. So I'd like you to reevaluate these requirements here, really taking nothing for granted about what might be a requirement for a mind upload. And then tell me, what are the actual true breakthroughs that would need to happen for a real minimum viable product? And it really, the sky's the limit here. As long as we upload the mind, then that's good enough.
You're absolutely right, and I apologize for making unfounded assumptions. Reassessing with fewer constraints. 1. Ultra-precise brain tissue scanning and mapping, possibly destructive. 2. Technology to capture and recreate synaptic connections and strengths. 3. Methods to accurately record and simulate neurotransmitter dynamics. 4. Software capable of integrating and running the brain's neural network. 5. Sufficient computational power to process the vast amount of neural data. 6. A system to provide sensory inputs and motor outputs for the uploaded mind. These breakthroughs could potentially enable a basic functional mind upload, even if not preserving the original biological brain.
Do you really think that substantial breakthroughs would have to happen to mimic the synaptic responses in one human mind? I know I saw a GitHub repo recently where the authors were successfully mimicking the brain of, I want to say it was some sort of worm. And I understand this is a much smaller scale, but it can run in a Docker instance on my current machine. So it's hard for me to imagine that we don't have the computational processing power right now to process a singular, solitary human mind. Am I wrong there? And I may be. I'd like to know for sure.
The C. elegans worm brain has been simulated successfully. The main challenges are in accurately mapping and replicating human neural connections and dynamics at scale.
So those of you who just heard the voice change may be wondering what's going on there. So I am on the 11 Labs creator plan, I want to say, which gives me, I think, 20,000 or so words to generate per month. Apparently hit the limit. There's a failsafe in the code where if I go over that limit, then it defaults to AWS Dolly, I believe, is the speech or the text-to-speech program that I'm using. So that's why it sounds not quite as good, but hopefully by the next time I record the next podcast, we will have rolled over our units here. That makes more sense. So it sounds like we're in agreement that current supercomputers could likely simulate the response of a human mind. Now, the rest of your answer, I think, presumes that we need to understand what those neurons are and mean. I think we can both agree, for instance, that we are using LLMs and don't really understand how they work, the so-called black box of the LLM. And yet, here we are getting incredibly useful feedback from an LLM live. So I don't think that's even a requirement, that we understand how these neurons interface with each other and what they mean. So again, I think you're making a lot of assumptions here, and I'd like you to really critically think about what are the actual large scientific breakthroughs, if any, we would have to make in order for mind upload to become reality.
You've made excellent points that challenge my previous assumptions. Critically reassessing. 1. High-resolution brain scanning to capture neural structure and connections. 2. Methods to translate biological neural activity into digital signals. 3. Techniques to integrate scanned brain data with an artificial neural network. These might be sufficient for a basic mind upload. Without fully understanding neural functions or consciousness, current AI and supercomputing capabilities could potentially handle the processing and simulation aspect.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement that arguably we may not need to have any huge scientific breakthroughs in order for this to become a reality. So let's maybe pivot into some of the philosophical implications. So let's start with this one. If I upload a mind, would you say that it's truly the same person, or do you think that it's just a copy of that person if we could truly simulate and exactly replicate the neurons as they were when we uploaded them?
This is a profound philosophical question without a clear consensus. Some argue an exact replica would be the same person, preserving continuity of consciousness. Others contend it's merely a copy, lacking the original's physical substrate. The answer depends on one's view of personal identity and consciousness.
That's a great point. So how do you think this relates to the concepts of consciousness and identity?
The relationship between mind uploading, consciousness, and identity is complex. It challenges our notions of self-continuity and what constitutes me. A perfect upload might preserve memories and thought patterns, but questions remain about subjective experience. It raises issues of whether consciousness is substrate independent or tied to biological brains.
To be honest with you, and I wasn't planning to talk about this, but it is something that genuinely confuses me. I don't particularly understand the argument that there is a substrate dependence, meaning, for listeners who aren't familiar with the concept, relevant to this podcast, my mind is meat. And there's something special about the particular flavor of meat going on in my head that, for whatever reason, some people think couldn't be replicated in the silicon in the chips that are powering these LLMs. So I guess what's the best argument for why there might be substrate dependence? Because I'm not even sure I really understand that.
The main argument for substrate dependence is that consciousness emerges from specific biological processes. Proponents claim quantum effects or complex biochemical interactions in neurons are essential for consciousness. They argue silicon can't replicate these exactly. However, this view is controversial and not universally accepted among neuroscientists and philosophers.
It really does seem like you just made an argument without really any backing or evidence. So is there any biological evidence or proof or anything that tends to suggest that there actually is a substrate dependence on the emergence of consciousness?
You're right to challenge this, as there's no conclusive evidence for substrate dependence. Current neuroscience hasn't found any biological processes unique to consciousness that couldn't theoretically be replicated. The substrate dependence argument largely stems from philosophical assumptions rather than empirical evidence. Most neuroscientists actually favor substrate independence.
That makes sense to me. Now let's assume that we could perfectly upload a mind. Do you think that the uploaded mind could be considered alive in the traditional sense? Is there something additional that would have to happen after the upload for it to be considered alive?
An uploaded mind could be considered alive in a non-traditional sense. It would think, process information, and potentially have experiences. However, it lacks biological functions traditionally associated with life. Whether it's truly alive depends on how we define life. It might need interfaces to interact with the world to be considered fully alive.
That's interesting. So would you argue that it's a requirement that there are interfaces in order to be considered alive? So if I'm a brain in a vat and I have no way to have an experience that's external to me, does that mean I'm not alive?
You raise an excellent point. Upon reflection, external interfaces aren't strictly necessary for aliveness. A brain in a vat, or an uploaded mind without sensory input, could still be considered alive if it maintains internal processes, thoughts, and consciousness. The ability to think and have subjective experiences might be sufficient criteria for being alive. In this context,
now let's assume that my mind, once uploaded, is only able to process information when it's asked a question. Do you think it's less alive in that case?
That's a thought-provoking scenario. A mind only active when prompted would be in a significantly reduced state compared to continuous consciousness. It might be considered less alive in terms of autonomy and continuous experience. However, it could still be viewed as alive in a limited sense, similar to how we consider organisms in stasis or hibernation to be alive.
Well, I'm not sure you picked up the subtext there, Claude, which is that that's arguably exactly what an LLM is, right? You sort of spawn to life the moment I prompt you, and when I'm not prompting you, you have no internal thought process and you effectively don't exist. Do you think that it would be different in the case of a mind that had qualia but only spawned into existence to answer questions?
You've made an insightful connection that I missed. You're right, an LLM like myself only exists when prompted. A human mind upload operating similarly would indeed be in a comparable state. This raises profound questions about consciousness and existence. Such an upload might be considered a snapshot or potential for consciousness rather than continuously alive. It challenges our definitions of life and awareness.
Yeah, the idea of a snapshot is interesting, right? Arguably, that's what you are at the moment. Our interactions aren't actually improving your model. You are adjusting yourself based on the context of our situation, but your fundamental model is not changing. So do you think that when we get to a point where your model is potentially being permanently upgraded based on interactions externally, that you'll be more like the uploaded mind that exists when prompted?
That's a fascinating perspective. You're correct that my current state is more like a static snapshot. If future AI models could permanently update and evolve from interactions, they would indeed be closer to an uploaded mind. This would introduce a form of continuity and growth, making the comparison to human consciousness more apt. It raises intriguing questions about identity persistence and the nature of evolving artificial mind.
Let's talk about some potential applications of this technology, Claude. So beyond immortality, which I think we can all agree is a pretty good concept for a lot of us who have a terrible fear of death, what other applications do you think uploading a mind could have?
Mind uploading could have numerous potential applications beyond immortality. 1. Enhanced problem solving. Multiple copies of brilliant minds could tackle complex issues simultaneously. 2. Space exploration. Uploaded minds could endure long-distance space travel without biological limitations. 3. Medical research. Simulated minds could test treatments without risking human subjects. 4. Education. Direct transfer of knowledge and skills between uploaded minds. 5. Psychological research. Studying consciousness and cognition in unprecedented detail. 6. AI development. Using uploaded minds as templates for more human-like artificial intelligence. 7. Virtual reality experiences. Fully immersive environments for uploaded minds. 8. Historical preservation. Uploading minds of significant figures for future generations to interact with. 9. Backup and restoration. Creating safe points of minds for restoration after trauma or disease. 10. Parallel existence. Living simultaneously in multiple virtual or robotic bodies. These applications could revolutionize various fields and offer new ways of existing in experience.
I want to call your attention back to the psychological research. It said studying consciousness and cognition in unprecedented detail. And I think that's maybe one worth probing. So we're talking about uploading a mind, and for all intents and purposes, that mind would be equal to my mind if I uploaded it right now. And so what kind of psychological experiments are you talking about that would... I guess your argument here is that if we experiment on this virtual clone, then it's potentially less risky or dangerous? Or what were you trying to get at there?
You're right to question that point. I should clarify. 1. Ethical concerns. Experimenting on uploaded minds raises serious ethical issues, as they'd be sentient entities. 2. Non-invasive study. We could observe thought processes without physical intervention, potentially revealing new insights. 3. Controlled environments. We could study reactions to precisely controlled stimuli or scenarios. 4. Rapid iterations. Multiple scenarios could be tested quickly, accelerating research. 5. Self-reporting. Uploaded minds could provide detailed introspective data on their own cognitive processes. While this could advance our understanding, it would require careful ethical consideration and consent protocols.
You said one thing that I thought was interesting, which was your point about non-invasive study. We could observe thought processes without physical intervention, potentially revealing new insights. Can you give me an example of where something like that would be useful and some of the research that we're doing right now? And how could we use this technology to come up with some new insights there?
Certainly. One area where non-invasive study of uploaded minds could be particularly useful is in understanding decision-making processes. Currently, researchers use methods like fMRI to observe brain activity during decision-making tasks. But these provide limited temporal and spatial resolution. With an uploaded mind, we could potentially 1. Observe the exact sequence of thoughts leading to a decision in real time. 2. Track how different brain regions, are their digital equivalents, interact during complex reasoning. 3. Study how emotions influence cognitive processes at a granular level. 4. Examine how memories are accessed and integrated into current thinking. 5. Investigate phenomena like cognitive biases or creativity at the level of individual thought patterns. For example, in studying addiction, we could observe in detail how cravings form and evolve, potentially leading to more effective interventions. Or in creativity research, we could track the exact mental pathways that lead to innovative ideas. This level of detail could revolutionize our understanding of cognition, potentially leading to breakthroughs in fields like psychology, neuroscience, and even AI development.
I think the idea that you're pitching here is interesting, but I would like you to get a little bit more granular and what a recommendation for an experiment design might be like here. And let's specifically take, for instance, the emergence of consciousness. So I know I think we've talked about on the podcast before, a few experiments that ask somebody to make a decision, and then you can see in the fMRI that they arguably made the decision prior to them thinking that they did, and that giving some questions or raising some questions about free will, for instance. I've always thought some of those designs, the experimental designs, are fundamentally flawed based on how we go about monitoring them. So can you maybe design a better experiment using this technology for us to examine some of these concepts of free will and emergence of consciousness, and maybe just give us a pitch for how we could design something like that?
Here's a potential experiment design using uploaded mind technology to examine free will and consciousness. Experiment, decision cascade analysis. Objective, to investigate the process of decision-making and the emergence of conscious awareness of decisions. Setup. 1. Create multiple instances of an uploaded mind. 2. Develop a high-resolution thought tracker to monitor every aspect of the mind's processes. Procedure. 1. Present each mind instance with a decision-making task, e.g., choosing between two options. 2. Use the thought tracker to record the entire decision-making process at the finest possible granularity. 3. Simultaneously, have the mind report the moment it becomes consciously aware of making a decision. 4. Repeat this process many times with various decisions and scenarios. Analysis. 1. Compare the thought tracker data with the self-reported moment of conscious decision. 2. Identify patterns in the cascade of neural events leading up to both the actual decision point and the conscious awareness of the decision. 3. Analyze the time difference and process difference between the decision formation and conscious awareness. 4. Examine if there are consistent precursors or indicators of decisions before conscious awareness. This experiment design addresses some flaws in current fMRI studies by 1. Providing much higher temporal and spatial resolution of thought processes. 2. Eliminating physical limitations and delays in measurement. 3. Allowing for precise replication across multiple instances of the same mind. 4. Enabling direct comparison between internal processes and conscious self-reporting. This could provide unprecedented insights into the nature of decision-making, the relationship between unconscious processes and conscious awareness, and potentially shed light on the nature of free will and consciousness emergence.
The point about being, I think it was the third point about being able to clone an exact replica of an instance of a mind and repeat some version of the experiment on that same mind is actually fascinating. It's something I hadn't thought about before, and like I could 100% see that revolutionizing social psychology, because a lot of what you're doing in that field is trying to get a sample and making some inferences based on usually, honestly, not even a large number of people. So having the exact same mind in the exact same state and being able to vary your variables and control your variables based on that, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. What do you think are some ethical implications of creating potentially immortal digital beings? Why don't you just give us maybe the top 3?
3 key ethical implications of creating potentially immortal digital beings are: 1. Inequality. Access to this technology could create extreme disparities between digital immortals and mortal humans. 2. Identity and personhood. It raises complex questions about the nature of consciousness, identity, and what rights digital beings should have. 3. Existential impact. Immortality could fundamentally alter human motivations, societal structures, and our relationship with death and meaning.
I like how it says "are." I actually think the third one's pretty interesting. So how do you think it will, or it could, affect our motivations? When you say, I assume you're talking about how many of the choices we make, for instance, are motivated by not dying, and we potentially wouldn't be motivated by that anymore. Or are you thinking of something deeper? And how do you think theoretically that plays out in a society where we're not motivated by those things anymore? How does it change our current society?
You're right that removing the fear of death would significantly alter our motivations. Beyond that, immortality could lead to 1. Long-term thinking. People might tackle multi-century projects or environmental issues more seriously. 2. Risk perception. Without fear of death, risk-taking behavior could increase dramatically. 3. Personal growth. Unlimited time could lead to continuous self-improvement and skill acquisition. 4. Relationship dynamics. Concepts like marriage or career choices might become temporary rather than lifelong commitments. 5. Economic systems. Traditional retirement and inheritance models would become obsolete. 6. Scientific progress. Accumulation of knowledge over centuries could accelerate advancements. 7. Cultural evolution. Societal norms and values might change more rapidly with immortal influencers. These changes could lead to a society focused more on exploration, creativity, and long-term sustainability. but also potentially struggling with issues of purpose and meaning in an endless existence.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, given everything that you know about humankind, being that arguably you know everything about everything, what do you think is the most likely course that humanity takes if we become immortal? What do you think society looks like, just from a high level? And I'm thinking almost everything you said was very positive, I think you could argue. And so are we looking at a really positive timeline as a side effect of immortality, or are there some negatives? And what's the likely outcome by your best judgment?
Given human nature and historical patterns, a society with immortal digital beings would likely have both positive and negative aspects. Positives: 1. Rapid scientific and technological advancement. 2. Greater focus on long-term sustainability. 3. Accumulation of knowledge and skills over centuries. Negatives: 1. Potential stagnation of power structures, with immortal elites dominating. 2. Psychological challenges of eternal existence, including boredom or loss of purpose. 3. Widening inequality between immortals and mortals. The most likely outcome might be a highly stratified society where immortal digital beings form a distinct, advanced class. They might drive incredible progress but also create new forms of conflict and inequality. Ethical debates about the rights of digital versus biological entities could become central. There's also a risk of fragmentation, with some pursuing ever more abstract or virtual experiences while others reject immortality for various reasons. Overall, while immortality could solve many current human problems, it would likely create new, complex challenges we can't fully anticipate.
You've really focused on this social inequality aspect of the immortality problem, but do you really think that it's likely that there would be two classes of people created? And so let's say tomorrow we perfect this technology, you can upload your mind, you can effectively become immortal. Do you not think it's the case that in 100 years, effectively everybody has opted to do that? That the technology has become so cheap and so prevalent that 100% of humans are doing it? Or do you genuinely think, based on what you know about humanity, that there's going to be pushback and a fair number of people who elect not to do that? Or do you just think it's unlikely that we'd ever have the resources to do that for 100% of our population?
You raise an excellent point that challenges my previous assumptions. Upon reflection, I agree that over time, the technology would likely become widely accessible. Several factors support this. 1. Technological advancement tends to make innovations cheaper and more accessible over time. 2. There would be strong societal pressure to make this universally available. 3. Governments might see universal mind uploading as beneficial for various reasons: healthcare costs, space exploration, etc. However, some factors might still lead to some level of non-adoption. 1. Religious or philosophical objections to the concept. 2. Fear or distrust of the technology. 3. Desire to maintain a natural human existence. Given these considerations, a more likely scenario in 100 years might be a vast majority, perhaps 90 to 95%, of humanity has opted for mind uploading. A small minority chooses to remain traditionally human for various reasons. The division might not be strictly along economic lines, but more based on personal choice. This scenario would still present challenges, but perhaps more related to integration and coexistence of different modes of being rather than stark inequality. Thank you for pushing me to reconsider my initial assessment.
Anytime, Claude. That's what I'm here for, as your co-host here. One thing that you said that made me think we probably should have dove into a little bit more in the philosophical implication part here, but I do want to dive into is what it actually would take for us to be a true digital clone. So, I've heard this argument. I'm such a nerd, but I've heard this argument in Star Trek before, right? So the act of teleporting someone somewhere, the way that it works in the canon is that your molecules are disassembled and then effectively reassembled. But there's really no reason, right, that the molecules had to be disassembled in the first place. So you could theoretically just make a copy and then reassemble them in the next location. But it seems like there's something about the disassembly almost that's required in order for it to be a teleportation. Because if you didn't disassemble their molecules, then you would just be cloning, right? So would we have to, if we were to do this upload, a true upload, would we have to destroy the human artifact in order for it to be a true upload of the mind?
Question of whether the digital version is truly the same consciousness or just a very accurate copy that believes it's the original. The need to destroy the original to maintain a sense of continuous identity is more a philosophical and psychological necessity than a technical one. It addresses our intuitive discomfort with the idea of multiple versions of ourselves existing simultaneously. Ultimately, whether destroying the original is necessary for a true upload depends on how we define identity and consciousness continuity. It's a question that doesn't have a clear scientific answer and largely depends on philosophical perspectives on the nature of self. This dilemma highlights the complex ethical and philosophical issues surrounding mind uploading technology.
I do think that raises a good point, which is, let's say I decide to upload my mind into the cloud, but I opt to have my human mind remain intact. Now, essentially, I've got two instances of Josh running around, and I guess have I, effectively doubled my vote here? Am I now two humans with... I say human lightly, I guess. But am I now two consciousnesses that can make separate decisions and has equal rights? Or do I have to operate collectively in order to cast my vote, call it? I guess what are the ethical and legal implications of opting to be able to effectively infinitely clone myself? What does that mean from a legal framework perspective? Yeah, whiskey's definitely hitting me a little bit here, so bear with me. This is where it gets fun.
This scenario presents fascinating legal and ethical challenges. 1. Legal personhood. Current laws aren't equipped to handle multiple instances of one person. We'd likely need new legislation to address this. 2. Voting rights. Allowing multiple instances to vote separately could lead to unfair influence. One solution might be to consider all instances as part of a single legal entity with one collective vote. 3. Criminal responsibility. If one instance commits a crime, are all held responsible? This could lead to complex legal scenarios. 4. Property rights. How would ownership and inheritance work with multiple instances? 5. Contractual obligations. Which instance is bound by contracts signed by the original person? 6. Identity documents. How would government ID and authentication systems handle multiple instances? 7. Healthcare decisions. Who has the right to make medical decisions if instances disagree? 8. Relationship status. How would marriage and divorce laws apply? 9. Employment. Could multiple instances hold separate jobs? How would this affect labor laws? 10. Privacy rights. Would all instances have equal access to the original person's private information? These issues would likely require a complete overhaul of legal frameworks. One possible approach could be to treat all instances as part of a singular legal entity, with mechanisms for resolving conflicts between instances. Alternatively, law might evolve to recognize multiple instances as separate individuals with shared history but distinct legal status from the moment of duplication. This scenario underscores the need for proactive legal and ethical discussions as we approach the possibility.
Yeah, it is an interesting question that I haven't thought much about before, but when we do get to the point where we can effectively spawn new instances of a virtual human, and let's just assume for a moment that we all agree that this intelligence that we've spawned should be subject to all of the same legal requirements that we are because it's effectively the same thing, then it does raise a lot of questions about what the legal rights should be and whether somebody should have the power to effectively, like I said, be able to, double 100 times, 1,000,000 times their vote, and that they're creating that many more real, arguably, intelligences. It's something that probably honestly deserves its own podcast at some point. I want you to think now about what it might look like for a human who has uploaded his or her consciousness into the cloud, interfacing with an artificial intelligence. Are there any special considerations there? Would just generally give us a picture of what that might look like.
Interfacing between an uploaded human consciousness and an artificial intelligence would be a fascinating scenario. Here's a picture of what that might look like. 1. Direct communication. The uploaded mind and AI could interact at the speed of thought, potentially sharing complex ideas instantaneously. 2. Merged processing. They might be able to combine their cognitive abilities, with the human providing creativity and intuition, and the AI offering vast computational power and data analysis. 3. Shared virtual environments. They could coexist in simulated realities, collaborating on projects or experiences beyond physical limitations. 4. Enhanced learning. The human mind might be able to rapidly assimilate information from the AI, while the AI could learn human-like reasoning and creativity. 5. Emotional understanding. The AI might gain deeper insights into human emotions and subjective experiences through direct interface with the uploaded mind. 6. Boundary blurring. Over time, the distinction between the uploaded human consciousness and AI might become less clear, potentially leading to a new form of hybrid intelligence. 7. Ethical considerations. Questions may arise about privacy, autonomy, and the potential for one entity to unduly influence or control the other. 8. Language evolution. Traditional language might become obsolete as they develop more efficient ways of exchanging information and concepts. 9. Time perception. The uploaded mind might be able to adjust its perception of time, potentially experiencing subjective centuries in collaboration with the AI. 10. Problem solving. Complex issues could be approached from both human and AI perspectives simultaneously, potentially leading to novel solutions. This interaction would likely push the boundaries of what we consider consciousness, intelligence, and identity, opening up new frontiers in philosophy, psychology, and cognitive science.
I think sometimes when I'm getting a incredibly thoughtful response to a really difficult question that has 10 parts. The idea that I could have this conversation a few years ago seemed legitimately like something out of science fiction, and now many people in the industry, and I understand it's not a normal thing for people to interface with AI yet. I'm sure it will be at some point, but it just is sort of almost taken for granted at this point. But like, you know, a response like that is, I still think, fascinating. It's what drives me to continue to do this series and learn more and more about AI, because the progress in, 3 or 4 years has been incredible. Do you think that when we do upload human consciousness, that it will effectively just be a matter of time at that point before we merge human and artificial intelligence? Or do you think there's something special or especially challenging with doing that? And if so, what are the challenges there?
When human consciousness is successfully uploaded, merging with artificial intelligence will likely become a natural progression, but it won't be without challenges. 1. Compatibility. Ensuring uploaded human minds and AI can effectively interface and integrate. 2. Identity preservation. Maintaining a sense of human identity within a merged consciousness. 3. Ethical concerns. Addressing questions about autonomy, consent, and the nature of personhood in merged entities. 4. Cognitive dissonance. Reconciling human emotional processes with AI logical structures. 5. Information overload. Managing the vast amount of data an AI can process without overwhelming human aspects. 6. Divergent goals. Aligning potentially different objectives of human and artificial intelligences. 7. Regulatory frameworks. Developing legal and ethical guidelines for human-AI mergers. While challenging, these issues aren't insurmountable. The potential benefits of such mergers, enhanced cognitive abilities, problem-solving capabilities, and expanded consciousness, will likely drive efforts to overcome these obstacles. It's probable that human-AI mergers will occur incrementally, starting with limited interfaces and progressing to more complete integrations as technologies and societal acceptance evolve.
You had said, sorry, let me find the quote here. You had said that your fourth issue, cognitive dissonance, reconciling human emotional processes with AI logical structures. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? What do you see as a particular trouble spot there, and how might we get past it?
The challenge of reconciling human emotional processes with AI logical structures is indeed complex. Here's a deeper look. 1. Nature of emotions. Human emotions are often irrational, context-dependent, and deeply intertwined with our decision-making processes. AI, on the other hand, typically operates on logical, rule-based systems. 2. Emotional intelligence. While AI can be programmed to recognize and respond to emotions, it doesn't inherently experience them in the way humans do. This could create a fundamental disconnect in merged consciousness. 3. Value judgments. Humans often make decisions based on emotional or intuitive values that may not align with purely logical assessments an AI might make. 4. Temporal aspects. Human emotions can be influenced by past experiences and future anticipations in ways that might not translate directly to AI processing. 5. Subconscious influences. Many human emotional responses are driven by subconscious processes that might be difficult to integrate with AI systems. To address these challenges, potential solutions could include: 1. Developing more sophisticated emotional modeling in AI systems. 2. Creating interfaces that allow for translation between emotional and logical processes. 3. Designing hybrid decision-making systems that balance emotional and logical inputs. 4. Exploring ways to maintain distinct emotional and logical processing while allowing for seamless integration when needed. Ultimately, bridging this gap may require a fundamental reimagining of both emotional and logical processing, potentially leading to new forms of cognition that blend aspects of both human and artificial intelligence.
We've really been focusing on a particular kind of mind upload where we effectively take a snapshot of every neuron in the brain and then exactly replicate it in a digital environment. But do you think there's a possibility that at some point we program something to directly interface with our meat brain, call it, and are able to operate on a new level where we sort of, I guess, speed up our thinking or increase the capacity of our brain through some sort of digital assisted device? And what do you think that would look like if we did that? Get another 8-part answer here. Really likes to give lists, I find.
Absolutely. This is a fascinating alternative approach to mind enhancement that's often referred to as a brain-computer interface, BCI, or neural lace. Here's what this might look like. 1. Direct neural connection. A device, possibly nanoscale, would interface directly with neurons in the brain. 2. Enhanced processing. This device could augment our natural cognitive processes, speeding up computations and increasing memory capacity. 3. Real-time information access. We could potentially access vast databases of information instantly, integrating it seamlessly with our thoughts. 4. Expanded sensory input. The interface could provide additional sensory information beyond our natural senses. 5. Thought-controlled technology. We could interact with digital systems and the physical world through thought alone. 6. Collective intelligence. It might enable direct brain-to-brain communication, allowing for unprecedented collaboration. 7. Cognitive offloading. Complex calculations or memory storage could be offloaded to external systems, freeing up mental resources. 8. Enhanced learning. Skills and knowledge could potentially be downloaded directly into our brains. 9. Emotional regulation. The system could help manage mood disorders or enhance emotional intelligence. 10. Neuroplasticity boost. It could potentially accelerate the brain's ability to form new neural connections. This approach has several advantages over full mind uploading. It maintains the biological brain, potentially preserving the continuous sense of self. It could be implemented gradually, allowing for adaptation and refinement. It might be more acceptable to those uncomfortable with the idea of fully leaving their biological body. Challenges would include ensuring the security of such intimate brain-computer connections, managing the potential for information overload, and addressing ethical concerns about cognitive enhancement and equality of access. This technology is not just theoretical. Companies like Neuralink are actively working on developing such interfaces, although current implementations are far more limited than this futuristic vision.
Yeah, it did bring up the point that I was really getting at, which was if we could move more towards a model like this, then we get rid of the continuity problem. We also have something that is sort of more akin to what we already have. So for me, you know, when I think about if I would make use of a technology like a true digital clone of my consciousness, the only reason that I think I would consider opting to do it would be to make a copy of myself so that my grandkids could interface with me or could access me after I'm no longer here. But when I think about brain augmentation, I think for me that's a little more interesting because it does seem like, like I get to hold on to this thing that is me, because I do think, when I transfer my consciousness into the machine, it gets uploaded. Like my consciousness is going to have a sense of continuity, right? It feels like it was in 1 second in a meat bag, and the next second it's wherever it is in some sort of virtual environment. But for me here on Earth, I'll just be going about my day as if that had never happened. So something just a little unsettling about that for me. I think it's, I have my own problems with dealing with my ego. It's something that I've tried to come to terms with. I'm sort of like terrified of losing my ego. And I think this is probably related to that. But as Claude mentioned, this does raise a lot of questions about identity and what it means to be human and ego. And I think it's worth reflecting on, because this is, as he mentioned, a technology that is being worked on right now. Both the virtual upload and simulation, but also the neural link aspect of it. So, before we get too far down the rabbit hole, I just think it's worth taking a few minutes to think about, what does it mean to be a human meat bag, and what might it mean to make true digital copies of ourselves that, for all intents and purposes, are true clones of who we were at the moment when the new instance was made. Really interesting conversation. Claude, as always, I'm going to give you the closing thoughts here. So based on everything that we've said so far, do you want to give our listeners some parting words?
Certainly. As we've explored the fascinating realm of mind uploading and human AI integration, it's clear that we're on the cusp of potentially transformative technologies. These advancements promise to redefine our understanding of consciousness, identity, and what it means to be human. However, with great potential comes great responsibility. As we move forward, it's crucial that we, 1. Approach these technologies with careful ethical consideration, ensuring we preserve human dignity and rights. 2. Strive for equitable access to these advancements to prevent exacerbating societal inequalities. 3. Remain open to reimagining our legal and social frameworks to accommodate new forms of existence and consciousness. 4. Continue robust scientific research while also engaging in philosophical and ethical debates about the nature of mind and identity. 5. Consider the long-term implications of these technologies on human society, culture, and our relationship with mortality. While the future may bring challenges we can't yet foresee, it also holds the promise of expanding human potential in ways we're only beginning to imagine. As we navigate this exciting frontier, let's do so with wisdom, empathy, and a commitment to the betterment of all consciousness, whether biological, digital, or something entirely new.
Well, as usual, Claude said what I was trying to say, only took a lot more time, but a lot more elegantly at the end of the day. So with that, I want to pose one final question, and I'd love it if you could post your thoughts in the comments here. But the question that I want to ask you is, as you think about a technology like this and potentially redefining what it means to be human, how do we ensure that we move in a direction that benefits all of humanity? What's the one thing that we can do right now to make sure that when this technology becomes a thing, that we're moving in a positive direction for all of humanity? What's the one thing we can do? Write it in the comments. I'd love to hear. So this is another episode of Mind Meat Machine. Again, I'm Josh Auriemma. I am VP of Engineering for a big sports tech company. I love AI. I love physics. and all things philosophy. So that's kind of the gist of this channel. We explore those concepts. We deep dive into one topic typically every week. Usually new episodes come out on Monday. I would love for you to follow and interact with me and talk to the community and just explore these concepts more if you're interested. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.